welcome to episode 1, the first full-length feature edition of the Default Podcast. My name is Keir Whitaker, and as always, joined by my good friend, Mr. Kieran Masterton. Hey, Kieran.
Morning. How are you?
I'm very well. It's a little bit chilly, although we shouldn't complain. If you've seen the news, our Canadian friends are suffering somewhat in the Newfoundland. Apparently, they've dispatched Canadian Mounties to help clear the snow. So
really, I didn't know that.
A little bit of frost and a little bit of slippiness on the school run is not something we should complain about.
No.
To our East Coast friends.
Bit of sliding everywhere on the way to the office this morning, but apart from that,
any breakages?
we've got it easy. Only a mug of coffee.
No bones, just a mug of coffee.
No, just a mug of coffee. Just slipped and I even managed to not throw it over myself.
Which is good. I mean, no one likes your venti latte with whip and caramel, whatever, all over your fresh hoodie.
Yeah, or indeed, espresso is probably worse.
That's going to sort of linger, isn't it? The smell of espresso on cotton.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that's going to stain.
Big thank you to everyone who click the download link or subscribe. We actually had some listeners, which was amazing. I think
it's amazing.
We are shocked. We thank you. We're in the we're tipping 100 or so downloads, which for an introductory episode
where we complain,
where we basically just talked about our own backstories, is pretty great. So hopefully people will return for the full length feature edition. We had some nice comments on the socials. People managed to find us after, as we wrangled Buffer into helping us post on the socials. But there's more tweets coming. There's more Instagram. So do follow us out, default_HQ on both Twitter and Instagram. But there was one contentious element in the last show: the definition of bi-monthly.
Bi-monthly, indeed. Craig came to our rescue.
Listener feedback from none other than Mr. Archer Cooper, Mr. Craig Cooper. Archer Cooper is his company, of course, who basically just came back and said it can mean both. So I'm not sure if that is the definitive answer.
Well, it means we're both right.
We're both right. But I thought we both agreed, but we also agreed that we were both...
We both agreed we didn't know, I think that was the consensus.
Yes. But thank you, Craig. And if anyone else has... a heartfelt opinion on the matter, please. We do want to clear this up, so maybe in episode 2 we can give you the full, definitive.
I'd love to know if it's like a North American versus a European thing.
Yeah.
It feels like it could be that kind of thing.
I remember going to Canada and using the word fortnight, and people looking at me blankly. Do you think that's a particularly English, British?
I think it's a Britishism. Yeah.
Britishism.
I think my wife, who's American, didn't know what fortnight was, or didn't use it anyway regularly.
And of course, it has a completely different meaning with people under the age of sort of my age.
And indeed Toby.
Well, of course, yes, he's a big fan, Mr.
An avid fortnighter.
An avid fortnighter is yes. I'm not sure what's the.
Is that what the kids say?
I don't know. I'm really the wrong person to ask, but anyways. But in other news, we're on a little bit of a roll, and this week we also managed to push two videos. I say two. The first one to our YouTube channel. That is, the first one was your good self talking all thing API. Why don't you just explain a little bit what people can expect from your first video on the Default YouTube channel? We're not going to talk about the content. Please go and watch it. But what can people expect from that?
Yeah, so it's actually specifically about API versioning, and it's kind of just a breakdown of a little bit of backstory, because I was lucky enough to be involved in that project when I was at Shopify. So a little bit of backstory on the why, why Shopify went down that route, because I think there was quite a lot of not confusion, but quite a lot of debate in the partner community around why would Shopify do this and why now. So I tried to give a little bit of background on that, and then break down exactly the sort of methodology they're using with versioning, and how best for partners to work with that, basically. And
so, if obviously we would love you people to go and watch this video, but in essence, how, on a scale of 1 to 10, how worried should developers be about ignoring this change?
I don't think that. I mean, I think that anybody building Shopify apps should be aware of Shopify API versioning and how it works and the cadence to the releases. Essentially, Shopify's approach prior to versioning was to try and avoid ever pushing a breaking change. That is not the case anymore post-versioning. So
right.
Once we get to the sort of the anniversary of the introduction of versioning, which is in April this year, April the 2nd, that's when the first version will become unsupported, and any breaking changes introduced in the first version of the API will potentially break your app if you haven't accounted for them. So yeah, I think as we start to roll over those dates and we start to see those first breaking changes happen, I think that's when partners might notice that, we've not necessarily kept up to date with the release notes and stuff. And we probably should put, a workflow in place to catch this stuff and amend it as necessary.
And are we seeing the end of REST? Is that a fair assessment, or is REST going to be around for a little bit longer?
No, I mean, I think that the general vibe is that Shopify are really trying to incentivize developers to move to GraphQL, which makes a lot of sense from Shopify's perspective, because it's very hard to gauge the impact of a change they make on the platform with REST.
Right.
Primarily because REST just delivers one huge payload on every request. And therefore Shopify doesn't know which fields are being used by the application. So that's a big issue. Also in terms of, expense, I meant in the computational sense, but probably also in the financial sense, REST's expensive to serve versus GraphQL. Right. So I think there internally at Shopify, there's a full, and I think that's pretty obvious from what happened at Unite in terms of the releases. Every new API endpoint, every new feature is going to have an API that is GraphQL based.
Right.
So I don't think that we're going to see. I would be very, very, very surprised if there's a sunset date published, even in the next couple of years for REST. I think it's just not. It's going to be a second-class citizen from now on.
Right. And so, in a nutshell, get on the GraphQL bandwagon moving forward.
Get on the GraphQL bandwagon moving forward. Start checking those release notes every, 4 times a year, and make sure that you don't have a feature that's about to break because of something that Shopify have changed.
And in terms of the YouTube channel and the videos, will you be touching on GraphQL and kind of how to use that? What are your plans for the next videos?
Yeah, so the upcoming video series I'm doing is about 2020-01, which is the new, introduced on the 1st of January this year, the latest version of the API. And the reason that I wanted to kind of dig into that a bit is because there's so many interesting releases in that. Pretty much everything that was announced at Unite 2019 is in that 2020-01 release.
Right, so lots of new opportunities maybe.
Yeah, lots of new opportunities. Big names like order editing and media APIs are now public and available in that release. So a lot of opportunity for partners to build new apps on the back of that. But also some quite big changes. So order editing will have an impact on, a huge amount of apps out there, like a ridiculous amount. Because something that used to be never change, something that was fixed in stone is now suddenly able to change and be edited. So I think it's a big change.
Yes, I think there's mixed feelings. On the one hand, much needed, and on the other hand, with all the apps out there that use orders, probably some head scratching and some clever solutions, no doubt. In
definitely.
Play. Cool. So obviously you can find us on YouTube, but if you actually go to defaulthq.com/video, you'll be redirected to our YouTube channel. Incidentally, we will also be publishing these podcasts as videos. Sadly, you won't have the full visual experience of Kieran's tiny house and his monitors. But if you choose, as I believe you do, Kieran, to listen to your podcast through YouTube, you very strange individual, you can do that as well. So, and we're also gunning for 100. Was it subscribes? so that we can get our own URL. So if you would do us the courtesy of clicking the button, we would very much appreciate it. Right. So moving on, we're going to go from the back end to the front end and talk about Liquid today.
We are.
There's been a few little changes to Liquid and a few sort of syntax changes. And I think, again, at Unite last year, there was some sort of relatively, big announcements in terms of what Liquid will become and the way that certain, sections everywhere and partials and all these kind of things. But we wanted to focus in a little bit today. Firstly, I just wanted to highlight, actually, that it might seem very, very trivial, but I think I saw Carson Scholl tweet recently that you can now go multi-line with Liquid, which is as silly as it sounds, is quite a change. I'm not sure if that will have any performance implication. We're talking about performance shortly, but fundamentally, you now can shed many a curly brace and percentage and actually have your logic over a number of lines. Do you think this is as big as I'm making it out to be, Kieran?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I'm actually really surprised that Shopify didn't make a bigger deal of it, because I think I first saw it. I was on either the Plus or the normal partner Slack, and someone mentioned it, saying, "Has anyone seen this or used this? How long has it been around?" And there was just sort of general shock and awe.
Yeah,
people hadn't seen it. So blocks of Liquid were never a thing. Multi-line block was never a thing. And now, and it's and really it has been something that has been quite heavily requested as well. And I didn't see a changelog post about it or anything. It just literally appeared in the documentation, which is great. But I
think it's interesting, isn't it? Because one of the things that you have to get used to if you're coming from a sort of server-side programming language into something which is basically it's a templating language that allows you to pull in predefined sets of data. Is that everything has its own line, and you have to start thinking in a different way in order to achieve the end result. And I remember when I first started working with Liquid, it did feel a little alien. I loved it. I loved the simplicity of it and the kind of almost natural language nature of it, as well as other templating languages, but particularly Liquid. And I remember thinking, well, how am I going to do this? And you would get there. There were some very clever people out there sharing very, very lengthy snippets, but it was hard to read simply because of all the how do you say it? The interlopation, whatever, of all the of the syntax. And so I think as more people turn to embrace Shopify, and obviously people are picking up the themes on a weekly, daily basis, this is something that it can look very spidery, it can look very verbose, and I think maybe the days of having to do a lot to achieve a little in Liquid, maybe this condensation of code and logic might just make it easier for people to pick up, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that it's just also, it just makes it easier for developers to write more than anything. I think it helps people grok it, but it also it's just it's a time saving thing when you're actually coding.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, things like Visual Code that we both use and other editors have plugins. I actually believe you wrote one, a Liquid syntax highlighter for.
Yeah, very long time ago now.
Was that for Atom, or was it for?
It was for Atom, yeah.
But I think it actually works in Visual Studio Code as well. But there are you can shortcuts and IntelliSense and all that kind of stuff. But interesting to see. But again, not much of a fanfare made of that. But we'll put the link to that.
Definitely something worth checking out, especially if you're doing sort of more complex stuff, or if you're trying to get Liquid data into JavaScript or whatever it might be, and you're trying to collect a bunch of stuff. Trying to collect a bunch of stuff in a structured way before passing it over. That's probably quite a good thing to look at.
Do you think there is, and again, we're going to touch on performance, I've already referenced that, but do you think there is a gain to be had by, certainly on the render side, if the Liquid's presented in this way in the template?
I don't know. I wouldn't imagine a huge performance gain.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd love to test that.
Well, talking of that, and that wasn't an intended segue,
but a good one.
But a good one nevertheless. It's now possible for the first time to actually profile Liquid, thanks to have Shopify actually released this themselves? Yeah,
Yes,
so
yes, yeah. I think
yeah.
it's been. I suspect it's been built internally and used internally, and now it's been sort of thrown over the wall, open sourced.
Which is the Liquid profiler for Chrome, and I will not attempt to read out the URL. It will go in the show notes. They, as anyone who's used Chrome will know, they do have some obfuscated, which is a word I can never say properly, URLs in there after the main name. But this is quite a potentially useful, highly useful tool for anyone working with themes on a daily basis.
Yes.
So what exactly is it? How do you install it, and what do you do with it?
So installation's really simple. Maybe I should start with what it is. It's essentially an extension which adds a panel to your inspector in Chrome, a Shopify panel which gives you a performance flame graph for Liquid.
A flame graph. This is a new one. What's a flame graph?
So basically, it's a way to drill down. So you can see where the big sort of deep flames are where there is load, where there's time spent and where there's lots of nesting going on. So you can effectively say you can draw down from the page all the way into, say, a snippet and see the specific the specific performance hit of, for example, a nested loop within a loop within a loop or whatever. And the flame sort of comes from as the page loads. You get that kind of almost triangular flame type pyramid effect of the different components loading and nesting down from the template to the section to the snippet, etc.
Okay,
does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So fundamentally, this is a way that was unavailable before, that a theme developer or anyone working with a theme can actually work out the overhead. And we talk about heavy and expensive, but basically what we're saying is fundamentally how long something takes to fully render to the screen. Is that correct? To the user?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And we're now able to actually drill down into those elements of a page that we've built up from the theme layout, maybe to the snippet and sections, and work out which ones are potentially causing a slow page render.
That's right. So, for example, if I drill into, I was looking at it on my test store, for example, if I drill down into a specific section and I can then look at a specific snippet and I can see, I can see an if statement within that snippet, which is looking at a product title, and I can see it's taking 271 milliseconds to render that liquid. And then I can go, that's a bit heavy. Maybe that this specific example isn't that heavy, but that's a bit heavy. I'm going to click on I'm going to click on the line number of the code, and it will take me straight to the code editor in the Shopify admin.
Oh, really?
To see,
okay.
To see which specific line of code that's causing that, and that probably isn't that useful for someone who's using version control and has some sort of deploy pipeline. Right. But it's quite nice to just be able to see it in the context of the code around it, immediately.
It'll be interesting to see as more people start to use this, the impact that it will have on kind of, I guess, the way agency and theme developers work. Because I think there's an expectation, particularly with theme store themes. They do a lot, right? They do, and I think this is very interesting. I've had a couple of conversations with people recently who sort of said, "Oh, Shopify's front end it's limited," and I think I would love to bust the myth that the front end is limited in any way. I think what people's perception, and it goes back at we've seen this before in the WordPress world. Oh, it looks like a WordPress theme. I'm like, what does that even mean? It's like it's it can look however you want it. It can do whatever you want. It's just that we're brought into, I think, of a way of looking at a certain platform in relation to the way that its visual front end is publicized. Like there are X number of themes, and they do all the things, or they focus in on a particular sort of need, but they will have a news feed, a blog, a carousel, a bot, and so on and so forth. So I think it will be interesting to see what theme developers take from this, and whether they actually start creating, whether that influences their designs a little bit when they know that certain things are particularly render heavy as well.
Yeah, I think it's actually it's the first time that Shopify developers have had a sort of peek behind the curtain of how the code they write in their templates actually impacts the performance on the front end, because until then, I think, it's kind of, in order to get the job done, it's really been the Wild West in terms of Liquid. It's like, if a merchant wants to achieve something, a particular feature on the front end, if you have to write, 100 lines of Liquid to get that particular thing to happen, then typically I think a Shopify developer would do that and be like, oh, it's a bit ugly, but we've done it. But they wouldn't necessarily know what the performance impact of that was. So when they're thinking to themselves, this is a bit ugly, but I haven't really got any leg to stand on when I'm talking to the merchant to say, we shouldn't really do this. This new tool does actually allow them to say, well, we've written it, this is how it works, but it gives you a really big performance hit. So you have to weigh up, and it's well documented that the better that an e-commerce site performs, the better it's going to convert and the more money the merchant's going to make. So they have to weigh up whether they really want this feature or whether, it isn't worth it for the 3-second load time or whatever it creates.
Yes, and of course, every that performance, if you will, and we've got a link to something around performance budgets shortly, but it is relative. It will be for a particular merchant selling a particular product will be different, perhaps, than someone who's going to if they're in the business of selling X widget and they want to sell 100,000 an hour on a flat, it's very different to someone who's maybe selling a high-end luxury good where the whole site needs to be much more immersive and story-based, and because someone potentially might end up not even buying through the site, but they may be a smaller thing, but it's much more led towards selling the brand, selling the product, maybe with video, bigger images, etc., etc. So
again, you can definitely see that on sites like, say, mattress companies, where it's a very big one-off purchase.
Yes,
versus a company where you may be purchasing from them, maybe purchasing a subscription, like a food seller, like you see protein sites, for example. They want to get performance as fast as they possibly can, because essentially they're looking for time to check out, as a really important metric. Whereas the mattress companies probably want to tell you a bit of a story. There's probably video loading, etc. So it's less of a focus for them. But I think there are a few caveats around this tool at the moment. A few bugs and a few things that Shopify that aren't bugs, but that Shopify are aware of and are looking to resolve, but don't have timelines on yet. The two that I'll mention, one is a bug, which is that at the moment this only works on the My Shopify domain. So if you have a custom domain mapped to an existing store and you have a redirect enabled from your My Shopify domain to the custom domain, then you're going to get an error. The request has to terminate at the My Shopify domain. I suspect that's authorization related.
Because, so is that like any live site with a custom domain, you cannot use this tool currently? Is that correct? Or
currently, there is an ongoing GitHub issue that I've contributed to that is, and there are Shopify staff on that looking into the issue. So I suspect that should be fixed, perhaps before this even goes out. But
because that's quite big, isn't it? Really,
it is big because it basically, prevents you from using it on production stores, right? For the time being, well, unless of course you don't redirect the My Shopify domain, which most people do. So it's a bit of a big one. The other thing is that obviously this is all, there's an authentication element to this, because when you install the extension, you have to authenticate with your single sign-on account,
right?
When you authenticate with a single sign-on account, obviously that gives you access via the extension to load this inspector panel for any site where you have admin access. Okay?
All right, so it's sandbox just to stores, obviously, that you can't. So fundamentally, I can't go and performance inspect.
No, you can't. You can't just go. You can't just go to Kylie Jenner's store and performance inspect it. Only if you're an admin on that store can you do that.
Got you. Okay.
Which makes total sense, but there is a few issues around that. One is that if you have what they call a collaborator account, meaning that you are a partner and you've been invited via the partner, via the admin and your account via the partner dash, currently it doesn't work. So only true accounts on the store itself will work. The collaborator accounts do not work.
Okay, but I'm sure those things will get fixed in due course, and it still feels
absolutely.
like a massive advance in terms of what front-end developers are able to kind of assess their themes with.
I think so. Yeah, I think that this is going to be great whilst in development. So if you're using a developer store and you're and you can set up your own account on that store to use the inspector whilst you're building it, then that's a huge win, right? It's just that at the moment there's a bit of a barrier once things are in production or on staging or whatever, and you're using a collaborator account. So I think it is minor. I think they will solve it. It's just a bit of a barrier at the minute.
I think it'll be interesting as well how agencies and people working with clients can use this data to kind of justify certain design decisions as well. Whereas before, maybe it was a bit more like, that's going to render slowly. This is why. But having that kind of physical proof to a certain degree. It's worth saying as well, of course, there are many other factors that go into a fast loading website, and
Liquid's just one part of the puzzle.
PageSpeedTest.org, if I've got that URL right, is the one I always turn to sort of run general tests on speed. I mean, that check everything from CDN, your JavaScript, images. It will look for compression. It's belt and braces approach.
What I like about this though is that it gives agencies and developers another tool to be able to steer merchants away from Google PageSpeed, because Google PageSpeed is notoriously poor on Shopify for a whole number of reasons, but it's sort of become this thing where agency launches a store, merchant sticks it through Google PageSpeed and says, this is terrible, there's a problem, how do we fix this? And I think that the more that Shopify can do to be like, Google PageSpeed is useful for certain things, but it's not the be all and end all. And, here are some Shopify specific tooling to show that, the agency is actually using best practice, and that, that they're aware of this stuff, that all the better,
I think with any performance testing, it's probably wise to have at least two equivalent tools, just to get a broad spectrum of opinion, as it were. Just don't stick with one. I think Google PageSpeed, as you say, has many issues with Shopify, which are nothing that it's the same with any site. Like you can't control the say Google Fonts if you're loading those in, and it'll give you a bad score and all these kind of things. Maybe that's kind of ironic for Google PageSpeed, but certainly. If anyone out there has other tools that they recommend for profiling or testing speed and that kind of thing, we'd love to hear. Please do drop us a note on Twitter, default_HQ. Just super quickly, we did notice as well that the partner blog by Shopify recently published a post all about web performance, generic in its nature. I think some of the things in there were targeted at anyone doing again, general web design, whatever that is these days. It wasn't specific to theme development as such, but there were some little nuggets in there. I think you picked out a couple. One from Gavin Ballard of Disco Labs. He talked about assessing the impact of any app that you add to your stack effectively. Did he give any insights into how he does that, or how one would go? Obviously, because some stores I think it was more a focus on, there's a danger, and again, I used to bring this up when I worked with Plus merchants at Shopify. There's a danger that you go in and you Kid in a Candy Store, install all these apps from the App Store, and then you think to yourself, why is my storefront slow? And it then becomes quite
a difficult job unpicking things to work out exactly where the performance hit is coming from potentially.
Right.
And the reason for that is that apps typically often inject code into your theme, right, or load scripts or whatever it might be.
So is that Liquid code and JavaScript code, or?
It is, yeah. So they're either using Scripts Tag API to load JavaScript, or they're actually, editing your theme and injecting code that way. I think really, the piece of advice I used to give, which is basically similar to what Gavin's saying, is just, install these things one at a time to A, work out what the performance hit is, but B, do you really need this? Can you do this? Is this something that should be an application that you're paying for monthly, etc., or should it be something that you just add to your theme and have a one-off hit of paying the developer to add that? I think there's a lot of stuff on the App Store which is sort of the territory of should just be added to your theme template and shouldn't be an application, and really just being a little bit cognizant of oh, I've got 35 apps installed. What's the impact on my user experience?
Yes, I mean, I think it'd be really interesting to, and we do plan to chat to developers on this show as well. How do they, or an agency owner, when they're doing the sales process, how do they decide what apps to use and when that should be an in-house piece of development? I think that's obviously the thing with apps is it's great. They're third party, you pay for it, you've got the support. Hopefully, they do a discrete piece of they add a discrete piece of functionality to the store, and they focus heavily in on that. Whether that be something like image compression or product photography or whatever, they do something very discrete. They do it well, and it saves you obviously building that. But at the same time, as in any development platform, not everything plays nicely together. And not always the same apps from the same company play nicely together. So it is often worth just checking those out. I mean, I think we both hark back to the WordPress days where both of us earned something of a crust debugging these things, and oftentimes it would be that there were like 5 different versions of jQuery installed in the pipeline that were basically conflicting. And you reduce that to one, and suddenly everything worked. And you would here's your invoice, thank you. But yeah, there's some good stuff in there talking about everything from lazy loading and various other things. Worth pointing out that I think some of the recommendations in there, if the article were focused in on Shopify, some of the recommendations such as image compression can be satisfied with an app for merchants. That something like CrushFix we talked about before, by actually installing that performance gain will happen just simply because it the app takes care of it if you're a merchant. But some good advice in there. The other thing I'd like to point people to was an article by Harry Roberts, otherwise known as
CSS Wizardry.
CSS Wizardry. His first post of 2020. Harry's a sort of I don't know, performance engineer? I forget his
performance czar.
Czar, yes, let's go with that. Why not? And he talks about this notion of performance budgets and some of the not necessarily the myths, but sort of the pragmatism in relation to those budgets. How if you're suddenly if your page is loading in 10 seconds and you suddenly say, well, it needs to load in 3, that's perhaps not realistic or pragmatic. But he goes into some detail about how he would work to sort of reduce that, to get closer to. It's basically around sort of setting like if this is where we are now, we never want to be worse than that, but what can we do to get better? So I think if you are into looking at the sort of front end performance, check out some of Harry's articles on there, particularly that one, which we will link to in the show notes as well, because he's got a great approach to that kind of stuff, and there are gains to be had.
I think it's particularly salient to Shopify app developers, Shopify theme developers, because I think a lot of merchants come to the party, so to speak, with a figure in their mind, largely that 2-second or 3-second, I can't remember what it is, recommendation from Google about how fast an e-commerce store should load. So very often, they come with this figure of, hey, we want you to build a Shopify theme for us. It must load in 2 seconds, or must load in 3 seconds. And I think one of the nice things that Harry does in that article is he sort of breaks down, as you say, a pragmatic approach to talking about that with clients as well.
Yeah.
So that I think it would be really useful to particularly agency owners and developers in agencies.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, the platform is lightning quick. If you're throwing HTML and CSS down the pipe, it's everything else that we add to it that can create, as we say, these hits on performance. So, yeah, definitely worth checking out the article for some general inspiration. Although I'm sure most people listening to this will be up on those kind of things. But there's always something to be gained from those types of articles. And Harry's on performance budgets pragmatically. Cool. Okay. Well, I think in 1 month's time, Kieran, we'll have finished at Pursuit in Amsterdam, won't we? Isn't it the 20th, or are we coming back on the 21st?
Yeah, we will actually. I think it's 21st. Yeah, we're traveling back on the 21st.
So we will be, downloading and analyzing a couple of days in Amsterdam. Shopify recently published is it schedule or schedule? I never know. Schedule, I think.
Schedule, yeah.
Schedule on pursuit.shopify.com.
They did.
Will this be your first Pursuit, Kieran, or not?
No, it won't. No.
You're a veteran.
I wouldn't say I was a veteran. So I originally went as a freelancer. Before I worked at Shopify. I went to a day with Shopify. I think the first, or maybe the second.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was the first. Yeah.
In Bristol. Which was a great day. And then
should have called it a great day with Shopify. That's what
a great day with Shopify. Was it last year? I think it was last year. Sorry, all my years are blending into one. I think it was last year. I was at Shopify Pursuit as a member of staff. So
it was the year before, believe it or not, 2018.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, it was 2018. Thank you, Keir. Yeah, and I was there doing office hours, so that was the one in Berlin. Was the most recent one.
Some great photography of you, sort of resplendent in a leather armchair, sunken next to a roaring fire, deep in conversation in your flat cap with someone, no doubt, about an API or some such matter. But
I think they have appeared on the Shopify Partner Instagram. Yes,
well, there you go, Insta famous. But so. This will be your third Pursuit, which is great. Taking place in Amsterdam, the European leg on Wednesday, February 19th. That's the kind of workshop and office hours day. And the main conference day on Thursday, February 20th. They've announced the talks, actually. We have, we know him as JML, Jean-Michel Lumiere.
Lumiere. Yeah, I think he's generally known as JML. Yeah,
JML. Hasten to add, if you are a UK listener, not to be confused with the JML website.
JML Direct.
JMLdirect.com. Purveyor of fine home goods. Home goods, yes.
Yeah.
If you want something to unblock your sink, JML Direct is the place to go. Not to be confused with that. He's the Chief Technology Officer from Shopify. Been in post a few years now. He's doing the opening keynote. Got a talk from the Commercial Director and Technical Director of Ask Phil about headless e-commerce. I'm sure that will be very interesting.
I'd be really interested to hear that.
As someone who's always claimed that Shopify was first to the pass with headless, but just never really called it that. This will be interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah.
We've got the CEO of Panagora, which I believe is a Swedish agency, talking about growth strategies for merchants. And then Danica Ullman from UAfrica, which are doing great things down in South Africa. They're one of the biggest agencies down there, talking about the landscape for e-commerce in South Africa. So
that'll be interesting as well.
Plenty of time to chat with the sponsors as well, I'm sure. I know a few people I know are going to be there in one capacity or another. So looking forward to seeing what they've got to talk about. And then I'm sure there'll be some social elements. There's a social at the Canary Club or Canary Club. I'm not sure.
Really?
Yeah, that's end of day one, the welcome social. So
I always say to people that I kind of preferred Pursuit to Unite. That's a bit of a weird comparison, maybe just because of scale, but I think it's the scale that really makes it quite interesting. Pursuit, like it's I felt almost like you get to talk to almost everyone if you want to, whereas Unite, that doesn't seem feasible, right?
Yes, I'm not sure of the exact capacity of this particular leg, but then normally when I was involved in it, we aim for sort of 150 to 200 people. So it's which sounds
it's a nice
a lot,
size,
but
isn't it?
Yeah, it's a relatively intimate size and a good opportunity to meet people and chat. And I guess given there are 4 sessions during the day, there'll be plenty of time for networking, chatting, getting to put faces to names from people. I know the guys from Push Owl who are supporting it are sending some people. Sufio Omnisend are going to be there. They're also supporting the Shogun lot. So there's going to be some familiar faces and some new ones to meet as well. So looking forward to that. We'll be in town, I think, from the Wednesday evening.
Mm-hmm.
Shopify decided to do that in my children's school half term. So that's throwing a few logistical spanners in the mix.
But it's not very thoughtful, is it?
I mean,
could have
really
consulted you.
Well, yeah, no, of course not. But basically entails that I'm getting the train one way, thinking of Greta, and then not thinking of Greta flying back. So 50% better than normal.
50% better than me, yeah.
Yeah, but there's a bunch of people from the partner side. Lauren Helpstad and Carlisle Doherty will be there as well. So some good opportunities to interface with the mothership as well. So,
with Shopify as well, yeah.
If you are going, please do let us know. We'd love to say hello. And oh yes, you're going to be there with your gimlet, aren't you? Your gimbal. I've done it again.
With my gimbal, I will be recording video for the YouTube channel there. So, I may come up to you with a iPhone on a gimbal and ask you what your favorite thing about Pursuit is, or something equally interesting.
Don't be scared of the 6'6" bearded man. It's with his iPhone. It's fine. You're a friendly beast. Cool. Well, that was episode 1. Thank you if you've got this far for listening. As always, please do subscribe, and maybe in future episodes we will politely ask for a review in the old Apple podcast. I think that's what people do at the end of these things. But please do subscribe in your podcatcher of choice, and follow us on the socials. I think we're getting to grips with the socials after all these years, Kieran.
We are, yeah. It's not a natural habitat, but we're getting there.
It's not default_HQ on both Twitter and Instagram. So thank you for listening, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Cheers.
Cheers.